Hey y'all, how you doing? It's Saturday morning. It is May the 23rd. We are still in the midst of the coronavirus epidemic. The country, in part, is slowly beginning to open up here and there, and whether that is a good idea or a bad idea remains to be seen. But I do have good news. Y'all have heard me bitching about my hair in some of these videos, but as of right now, I have an appointment to get my hair cut, but it's not until June the 1st, so I got a little over a week to wait, but hopefully this happens and I won't look like such a woolly booger coming at you in these videos. Um, anyway, so today I thought we would talk about your familiars. And we're going to do this in terms of animals because there are animal familiars, there are plant familiars, and a lot of people don't realize this, but there are mineral familiars. Those are the three kingdoms: animal, plant, and mineral. Um, so I know you guys like stories. Y'all like me to tell stories. So this story is going to go back to the early 90s when I was first beginning to learn about Wicca. Um, I was living in my first house. My rent, I had a 2-bedroom house. My rent was $150 a month, if you can believe that. And I was getting my first taste of freedom. And this is important because when I get into the story, I'll touch upon this. But being gay and growing up in the South, you really, back then, you really feel like your growth was stunted in some ways because you didn't get to experience some of the things that your classmates got to experience with, first love, puppy love, first crush, getting to go out on real dates and things of that nature. So in my early 20s, I was really coming out of my shell. I had left college. I was working. I was living on my own. I had my first taste of freedom, and I was getting, I'm just going to go ahead and say, I was getting promiscuous. I felt like I was trying to catch up with, everybody else, that I had been held back in some way. So one of the things I was doing was getting in touch with my spiritual side too. And what I did was I took a length of rope and made a circle on the floor, and I went in that circle, and I cast a circle in the altar room, and I just sort of went into a meditative state. Cleansing breaths, like I told you in my previous video, deep clean, and just let your mind sort of let go and wander. And I found myself at a place called June Creek, and that was a place where we went swimming growing up, and it was very real in my mind, this place on the astral plane. I think of the astral plane a lot like the holodeck on Star Trek, where you sort of go in this room and it becomes there's this illusion that is so real. And I was standing there at June Creek. I could hear the water lapping against the shore. I could feel the sun down on my skin. I could feel the wind moving around me. And I went and stood in the water, probably up to my ankles, and I just, enjoyed the sensory feelings of everything when this big ass turtle came up out of the water. It was huge. And he introduced himself to me, and he told me to climb on his back. So I climbed on his back, and we went into the water, down under the water. Apparently I could breathe under the water, and we had this sort of long conversation while we were traveling. He'd occasionally come up out of the water, and the scene around me would change. I would see different scenery. Sometimes there would be people, sometimes there would not. And I'm not going to get into the entire conversation, but the essence of it was, I talked about how I was trying to catch up with everybody. I felt like I had been left behind, or the pause button had been pressed on my life. And so the turtle basically told me, he taught me about slowing down enjoying the experience of life rather than, you know, it's like when you have a good meal in front of you, you scarp it down so fast you don't even taste it, you know. So that was sort of the essence of my conversation. Then he took me back to June Creek and left me there, and he said, if you ever need anything, just, you know, call me, I'll be there. And so then I came out of the meditation and sort of went about my day. And I remember this happened in the summertime. Now, where I live now, our rainy season is in the colder months, but back home in South Carolina, it rains more in the summer than it does in the winter. And here we don't really have thunder and lightning that much, but back home there's always lots of thunder and lightning on these summer storms. But I remember it had been raining for about a week, and I needed to cut my grass, but it was continuing to rain. It was really wet. The grass was getting high. I went to go I was either taking out the trash or I was going to check the mail, and I looked over and I saw this funny looking rock in the grass, and I thought, well, what is that? Some kid must have thrown that there or something. So let me go move this rock, because when I go to cut the grass, I don't want to run over this rock and mess up the blade. So I went over there, and damn if it wasn't a turtle. And that was just about 2 days after this meditation had to happen. And so that for me was like a real affirmation of my experience with the turtle. Another thing that occurred was I had this friend, her name was Rhonda, and I worked with her in the cotton mills before they shut down. And she had a boyfriend, and they would go on these little adventures, hikes and stuff. And so sometimes I would tag along with them. And we went to a place called 40 Acre Rock up in Lancaster, South Carolina one time. And it's this huge acres and acres of wilderness, and they had hiking trails and whatnot. So we went hiking there, and at one point we stopped, and her boyfriend, I can't remember his name, he pointed over in a direction to, there was this bear cave there. And, you know, being young and stupid, I'm like, oh, well, let's go get a, you know, better look. And I went over to this bear cave to get a closer look, and I looked down, and I found this sticking up out of the ground. Let me get closer for you. That is a whole, intact turtle shell, not a flaw on it. And it was sticking up out of the mud, partway in, partway out of the ground. And I knew somehow it was meant for me. I was meant to find it. But here's the thing. In magic, Wicca, witchcraft, there's this exchange of energy which happens. You know, nature abhors a vacuum. Nothing is given unless something is received. So I said, I can't take this unless I leave something in its place. And I hadn't planned on this, so I didn't have anything with me. But back then, I had very long hair. It was probably down to here, very long. And I had it tied up because it was hot when we were hiking. So I took my friend's pocket knife, and I cut about an inch or so off my hair, because it was the only thing I had. And I was kind of I had a little bit of pride about my hair, so it hurt a little bit to cut it. So I left it in place of the turtle shell. And I've had this turtle shell since the early 90s. It stays on my spirit altar in my bedroom, where I have other sacred objects and tools that really help me connect to spirit and my guides and angels and what have you. That is one experience I had with a familiar. Then I had a second experience, and this happened, I want to say, maybe the late 90s, early 2000s, maybe as much as 2003 or 2004. I had met a woman in my town. She was not from my town. She was from Alaska, and let's just call her Jezebel, because me and her, we did not really part on good terms. And but at the time, she was what was her title? Assistant National Director of a famous organization which advocated religious rights for people who identified as Wiccan, witch, pagan, what have you. That organization is now defunct. And at the time, it had a pagan prison ministry division. And so I volunteered with this organization. I helped write a Wiccan study handbook that was published by the state of South Carolina, and it was issued to inmates who identified as Wiccan, witch, pagan, what have you. And then we were sent into prisons all over South Carolina to teach the course, because what had happened was there was a prisoner who identified as pagan who was not allowed to practice his religion, his beliefs. And so he was going to sue the state. And someone in South Carolina called someone in North Carolina, where my friend had been the official Wiccan advisor to the state of North Carolina, got her name. And so me, Jezebel, and some people from the prison went and met together at I think it was a Waffle House in Columbia, South Carolina. And we agreed to write that book and come teach the course and help find volunteers to come in and lead rituals, lessons, and whatnot, because without a volunteer to come in, the pagans, the witches, they couldn't hold rituals, they couldn't have classes, they couldn't have anything because they had no clergy. Now the Christians, they had their clergy, they had one assigned to each prison who would do the Christian services, and some of the Native Americans had representatives that would come in and allow them to smudge and teach their beliefs and practices, but the pagans didn't have anything. So that was the compromise. The guy agreed not to sue. Let me close this because I don't want a bunch of flies in the house. Anyway, so we traveled all over South Carolina teaching this course, and also at the time I met a lot of men and women who, when people go to prison, whether they're guilty or not, their friends and family, they may stick with them in the beginning, but a lot of times they find themselves alone. So I found myself corresponding with a lot of them, and they were from many different traditions and paths. There were some that were Gardnerian, there were some that were Celtic, there were some that practiced sort of a kitchen witchery, there was some Italian stregas. Oh, there was some people who did practice hoodoo, folk magic, and so in corresponding with these men and women, that's how I learned a lot of what I'm sharing with you and passed on. So that's why I have such a wide variety of knowledge on different subjects and things. And, I've really felt like I wanted to be someone there for these people. And I felt like if I was going to converse with them on these subjects, that I needed to learn about them. I mean, I had my specialties. My talent was with the tarot and whatnot. And at the time, I was not very good at spotting herbs in the wild and knowing what they were. I got all my herbs at the Piggly Wiggly. Anyway, back to my story. So this friend, Jezebel, she had a pet raccoon. Now, I gotta go backwards with this story again. So, my friend Jezebel, she had a lot of animals in her home. She had snakes, like a big python, African greys, parrots, kittens, cats. She had what do they call it? An iguana, dogs, just house full of animals. She was a animal rescuer, and so she was in that community. And she came into possession of this raccoon when someone she knew in Rock Hill got this raccoon that had been injured, and it had went to a man. That man apparently abused the raccoon. It went back to the woman, but the woman had too much on her plate. She couldn't care for and keep the raccoon, so it came to my friend Darla. Now, oh crap, I wasn't supposed to say her name. Oh well. Jezebel. It went to Jezebel. Anyway, Jezebel got that raccoon, and it's important because remember I said that raccoon had been abused by that man, so that raccoon didn't like men. I didn't like going over there when that raccoon was there because it would hiss and snarl at me. But anytime we went anywhere, I'd get in her truck, and that damn raccoon would be in the back seat. Well, anyway, we were going down to this prison way down past Beaufort, South Carolina, and that was about a 4-hour drive one way. And I told her, I said, well, if you're going to take that raccoon, you got to put him in his cage in the back seat, because I'm not getting in that little truck with that raccoon and have him, you know, hissing and barking and what have you at me. So she did that, and about halfway, 2 hours into this damn drive, where, you know, I was stuck with her, I couldn't do that, and she let the raccoon out. Well, I think it was within 10 minutes, this raccoon jumped on my head and bit my head. And of course, you know, you have all these little tiny blood vessels in your head, and I started bleeding. So imagine we show up to the prison. This is our first time at this particular prison to meet this class and teach this class. And here I am walking in with blood all caked in my hair and running down my face. And I'm surprised they actually let me in. So they took us into this room, and I was able to, I was escorted to a restroom by a guard, and I was able to wash myself up as best as I could, to clean myself up to teach this class. I'm sure it was, made a great impression. But anyway, that illustrates the point of how sometimes people have strange encounters with animals that eventually become their familiar. I know of one lady who, she told me she got bit by a spider, and she almost died from that spider bite, but afterwards she was able to, she started sewing a lot, and not just basic sewing, just intricate, beautiful things. I did not like that raccoon, but I do feel like he passed to me a little bit of his energy. You know, I've always been a little bit of a trickster. A lot of times I post things that have a double meaning and what have you. Raccoons are really powerful spirits for defeating enemies. I would know in the community I had a disagreement with someone. They once labeled me a snake in the grass, and I thought, well, that's cool because raccoons kill snakes, you know. Oh, and then here's another little thing I keep on my spirit altar. This is a little raccoon salt shaker or pepper shaker I found in Walmart. It was the only one because the companion to it had broken, and it was on sale for like $1 or something. So I keep this on my spirit altar. As you, like I said, it's a salt shaker. I got some herbs, special herbs inside there for purposes. Anyway, that is my story about how I came into contact with different familiars. And I do want to mention that I talked more about Jezebel in this edition of Hoodoo and Conjure New Orleans. It's the one with Marie Laveau's pink tomb on it. Here's a good shot of it. If you want to learn more about my experiences with Jezebel, I wrote this story called Louisiana Woman, Carolina Man. And in that story, I talk about how her pet raccoon was basically kidnapped. And we performed a spell, a very public spell, in her front yard to get the kidnapper to bring the raccoon back. And you'll have to read the story to see how that ended up. I also talk about in this article her Aunt Damiana's 9-day candle spell, a form of sex magic. I talked about other spells that she taught me for getting rid of an unwanted lover, removing negative energy, and how to hag ride. So it's a very good story. If you want to read it, again, it's in Hoodoo and Conjure New Orleans. It's the Pink Tomb edition, which you can get at Amazon.com or CreoleMoon.com. That's CREOLE Moon.com. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed this story, and like I always say, have a great day. Make the most of it. Goodbye.